Hi, this is Mrs. Rodriguez with Solving Two-Step Equations with Rational lesson. And all right, so let's get started. First of all, this lesson is basically continuing our journey through two-step equations. We're going to be focusing on negative numbers today. Let's start with the warm-up. The warm-up says enter the number that makes the equation 0.76 plus 24 over 100 equal to some mystery number over 100 plus 24 over 100 be true. All right, so there's a couple of ways to think of this. The first way you can think of it is, well, we know that this 24 over 100 is this 24 over 100. And then that means that this 0.76 needs to be converted to a fraction with 100 on the bottom. So one way we can do that is we can count the number of numbers, right, behind the decimal, and there's 2, which means that there should be 2 circles if we're using place value to write the fraction, and then I know that it's 76 over 100. The way I like to think of it, though, is, let me go ahead and erase that. The way I like to think of it is, I know that 0.76 is the same thing as 76%. Percent means out of 100, so I know that whatever this number is, you stick it over 100, and that gives you your fraction form of a percent. So the answer is 76. You would just take this and stick it on top of the 100, and that would make that statement or that equation true. All right, moving on to today. Solving two-step equations with rationals. Equations with rational numbers can be solved just like any equation, but you must follow the rules for integer operations. So like I said, today's emphasis is going to be looking at working with two-step equations with negatives involved. So first, before we start today's lesson, I want to review adding, subtracting, and multiplying and dividing with integers or positive and negative numbers, because we got to make sure that we're solid with that before we can start solving equations. So let's start with adding integers. Now remember, if the two values have the same sign, then you add them and use the same sign. So what does that mean? That means if both numbers are positive or both numbers are negative, you add them together and keep that same sign. So if it's two positives, it would be positive. If it's two negatives, your answer will be negative. So for example, 6 plus 5, they're both positive, so our answer is going to be positive, and we just add them together, and that equals 11. Negative 6 plus a negative 5, once again, you take the two numbers and you add them together, so 6 plus 5 is 11. They're both negative, so our answer is going to be negative. So that's if the signs are the same, okay? So that's if it's same sign. But if the signs are different, then you subtract and take the sign of the number with the greatest absolute value, okay? So if they're different, you're going to subtract, and then you're going to take the sign that has the greatest value, okay? So what does that mean? Well, here we have 6 plus negative 5. They both have different signs. So we would subtract them. So 6 minus 5 equals 1. Now the 6 is positive and the negative 5 is negative. Or I'm sorry, the 5 is negative. 6 is the bigger number and it's positive, so our answer is going to be positive. In the second example, we have a negative 6 plus 5. We're still subtracting. 6 minus 5 is still 1. But now that 6, which is bigger than 5, is a negative, so our answer is going to be negative. So if the signs are the same when you're adding numbers, then you just add them together and they keep that sign. So if both are positive, they stay positive. The answer is positive. If they're both negative, you add them together and the answer is negative. If the signs are different, then you take the two numbers and you subtract them. And whichever number is bigger, that's the sign you're going to use. So if the bigger number is negative, then you're going to use negative, your answer is going to be negative. If the bigger number is positive, then your answer is going to be positive. Okay? All right, now let's take a look at subtracting integers. So subtracting two numbers. Let's see. Rewrite the problem to add the. So remember, when you're subtracting, what you're actually doing is adding the opposite. Then follow the rules for adding integers. Okay, so let's take a look. In the first example, we have 6 minus 7. Well, if we add the opposite, then we're going to add negative 7. Okay? And now that it's an addition problem, now that we're adding, we're going to use the same rules for up here. So in this case, one is positive and one is negative, so we're going to use the different signs, right? And we said right here that different signs you're going to subtract. So 7 minus 6 is 1. And then it says take the sign of the greatest value. Okay, so 7 is bigger than 6. 7 is negative, so this is going to be a negative 1. In the next example, we have negative 9 minus 11. So we're going to add the opposite, so it's going to be negative 9 plus negative 11. They have same signs, and in the same signs, it says to add them together, and you keep the same sign that they have. So they're both negative, so we're going to add them together, and then since they're negative, the answer is going to be negative. In the last example, we have negative 3 minus a negative 8. So if we add the opposite, that ends up being a negative 3 plus a positive 8. They are different signs, okay? So they're different signs, right? The negative 3, the 3 is a negative, the 8's a positive, so that means we're going to subtract. So 8 minus 3 is 5. 8 is bigger than 3, and 8 is positive, so it's going to be a positive 5. Okay? Now let's take a look at oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Let's take a look at multiplying and dividing integers. Now remember, for this example, we use that analogy of if they have the same sign, they like the same music. So if you're riding in a car, and let's say you like hip hop and you're riding in the car with your parents and they like country, okay? If you have to go on a 6-hour car drive and you don't like country and they don't like hip hop, no one's going to be happy with what you play with on the radio, okay? Let's say you have your phone, but you forgot to charge it the night before, so your phone's dead. You can't listen to anything on your phone or look at anything on your phone. You're stuck just listening to the music your parents pick out. So if they like country and you like hip hop, and for 6 hours all you can listen to is country, you're not going to be a happy camper. Having said that, if you were driving the car, let's say you're 16, you're driving the car for the 6-hour trip and your parents are sitting in the back and you play nothing but hip hop music, and let's say they don't like hip hop music, they're not going to be happy because you're not playing country. So people with different tastes in music won't be happy unless their music's being played on the radio, right? So different music, not good, okay? People who like the same music will be happy in the long car drive. You know, if everybody in the car likes country music, everybody will be happy listening to it for 6 hours. If everybody in the car likes hip hop music, then everybody will be happy to listen to hip hop for 6 hours. But if you get some people that like hip hop and some people like country, and it's not good. So that's what you have to think about when you're doing multiplying and dividing integers. Do they have the same signs? Because then they like the same music and everybody's happy. But if they have different signs, then they're not going to be happy because you have some people wanting country, some people wanting hip hop, okay? So multiplying and dividing two numbers, if the signs are the same, then the answer is positive because everybody in the car likes the music, right? So if you have two positives, it equals a positive. If you have two negatives, it equals a positive. Because let's say the positive people like country and the negative people like hip hop. Well, if you have people who like country and that's everybody in the car, then they're going to be happy to listen to it. If everybody in the car is negative and they like hip hop, then they're going to be happy listening to hip hop and they're also going to be positive. Okay, so the example we have here is a positive 6 times a positive 5 gives you a positive 30. A negative 6 times a negative 5 also gives you a positive 30. So a positive times a positive equals a positive. A negative times a negative equals a positive. This is also true for division. So remember, the rules for multiplication and division are the same for integers. If the signs are different, then the answer is going to be, negative. Okay, so this is the scenario where some people like hip hop, some other people like country, and they're stuck in a car together, so someone's always unhappy, right? Because they have different signs. So in the first example, we have a positive with a negative, so we're going to get negative, and then a negative. That's not right. This should be a, I think what they meant to put here was a positive and a negative is a negative, and then a negative with a positive is also a negative. So for example, 6 times a negative 5 equals a negative 30. In the second example, you have now the negative first, so negative 6 times a positive 5, and you still get a negative 30. And this right here was just a typo from the worksheet. All right, moving on. Practice solving the following problems using the rules for integer operations. So problems 1 through 8 are simply you practicing adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing with positive and negative numbers. Okay, we're not at the solving two-step equations yet with them. We're just practicing these rules that we just reviewed. All right, so I'll do the first one. A negative plus a negative, they have the same sign, so I just add them together, and then I choose the sign that they both are, which is a negative. Okay. Go ahead and do problems 2 through 8 and pause the video, do problems 2 through 8, and then when you're ready to check your answers, go ahead and resume the video. Okay, and see if you got them right. Go ahead and pause the video now. Hi, welcome back. So for problem number 2, we have 5 minus 32, so that would be 5. Remember, we add the opposite, so plus a negative 32. Two different signs, so we subtract and we have 27. 32 minus 5 is 27. And the bigger number is negative, so it's going to be a negative 27. Okay, let me go ahead and put boxes around my answers. For number 3, we have addition, and they're both different signs. We have a positive 14 and a negative 27, so we're going to go ahead and subtract. 27 minus 14 is 13. The bigger number is 27, and it's negative, so that will be a negative 13. Negative 11 minus 8, we add the opposite, so that's going to be a negative 11 plus a negative 8. They're both the same sign, so we add them together, and our answer will be negative as well. 5, we have multiplication now. So multiplication, it's do they like the same music or not? And if they do, then they're happy. And in this case, we have a negative 8 times a negative 9. Both of them like the same music, so it's going to be a positive answer because they're happy, and 8 times 9 is 72. For problem 6, now we have negative 14 times a positive 3. Two different signs, so they like two different music, so our answer is going to be negative. They're not going to be happy, and we get negative 42. For number 7, we have a negative divided by a positive. Remember, division has the same rules as multiplication, so we have one that's a negative, one that's a positive, so they like two different music, so they're not going to be happy. So our answer is going to be negative, and 24 divided by 4 is 6, so our answer is going to be negative 6. And last but not least, number 8, negative 35 divided by a negative 7. They both like the same music. They're both negative, so they're going to be happy. The answer is going to be positive. And 35 divided by 7 is 5. Okay, if you got those right, go ahead and pat yourself on the back. Now we're ready to start looking at two-step equations. So we have problem 9 and problem 10. And it says, practice solving the equations below. Prove that your solution is correct by checking your work. So let's go ahead and look at number 9 first. So remember, our steps to solving equations. Let's go ahead and write those steps down just in case we forgot. So our steps. Number 1, you draw your river, okay? Remember, the river helps remind us that whatever we do to one side of the equal sign, we have to do to the other side of the equal sign to make sure that the equation stays balanced, okay? Number 2, we do order of operations backwards, and that's the key. Instead of doing parentheses, exponents, multiplication slash division, addition slash subtraction, instead it's going to be addition slash subtraction, then multiplication slash division, then exponents, and then parentheses. We're going backwards, okay? Because we're solving equations. And last but not least, where can I put my number 3? Number 3, we do the opposite. So when we're undoing the order of operations, when we're going backwards, we're going to do the opposite. So let's do number 9 and take a look at our first example. So number 9, first step, draw the river. Second step, do the order of operations backwards. So I have a -4 times k, and then I have plus 9. Well, since we're going backwards in order of operations, addition is going to come before multiplication. So I'm going to take care of that 9 first. So step 3, we do the opposite. So the opposite of adding 9 would be subtracting 9. And whatever I do to one side of the river, I have to do to the other. The 9's cancel out, and I get -4k equals 32 minus 9, which is 23. Once again, I do the opposite operation, so I have a -4 times k, so the opposite would be to divide. The 4's cancel out, and I get k equals -5.75. And that is my answer. Okay, so now we can check to see if we did this correctly. In the problem, when we solved it, we got k equals -5.75. Okay, and the original problem said -4k plus 9 equals 32. So to check our problem, what we do is, if we think that k equals -5.75, then where there's a k in the original problem, we're going to substitute that in. And we're going to see, does it equal 32? If it does, then we know we did it correctly. If it doesn't, we know something's wrong. All right, so -4 times a -5.75 plus 9. Well, we have two negatives, so a negative times a negative, they like the same music. It's going to equal a positive, which is 23. So then we have 23 plus 9, and 23 plus 9 is 32. 32 is what we were looking for, the answer to our original equation. So yes, we did it correctly. All right, now let's look at number 10. Step 1, we draw the river. Step 2, we do order of operations backwards. So in this case, we have x divided by 2 minus 14. Well, if we're doing order of operations backwards, the subtraction comes before division. So we are going to take care of that 14 first. So we're going to add 14, do the opposite. That's step number 2. If it's minus 14, we're going to do the opposite and add 14. Oopsie. And whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other to keep that equation balanced. My 14's cancel out, and I get x over 2 equals 20 plus 14, which is 34. Now, we have division, x divided by 2. So the opposite would be to multiply by 2 on both sides. The 2's cancel out, and you get x equals 68. Another way you can do this, and remember, there's always multiple ways of doing the same kind of problem. You could have just thought of it as, okay, x divided by 2 equals 34. What number divided by 2 gives me 34? And it's 68. So if that's how you do it in your head, if you can do that in your head, then that's fine as well. So let's go ahead and check our answer. We got x equals 68. The original equation said x over 2 minus 14 equals 20. So then that means wherever there's an x, I'm going to put a 68. And if it equals 20, then we know we did it correctly. So 68 divided by 2 minus 14. Well, 68 divided by 2 is 34. And 34 minus 14 is 20. We got what we were supposed to get, so we know that this is correct. Remember, you don't have to check your work on every single problem, but it is good to know how to do it, so on tests and quizzes, you can check your answers to make sure you're getting them right. All right, now let's take a look at the next section. Use your understanding of two-step equations to solve the problems below. All right, so now is your opportunity to practice solving two-step equations. So go ahead, you're gonna do 11 through 16, pause the video, try to do these problems on your own, and then when you're ready to check to see if you did them correctly, go ahead and resume the video. So go ahead and pause the video now. Okay, welcome back. So let's check and see if you got these correct. First step, draw the river. You're gonna subtract the 8 from both sides. You get 3x. This is a negative 10 minus 8. So we add the opposite, and if we add the opposite, it's gonna be negative 10 plus a negative 8, which gives us a negative 18. Divide both sides by 3, and we get x equals negative 6. For number 12, draw the river. We're gonna add 10 to both sides. And we get negative 2x equals 25. Divide both sides by negative 2, and we get x equals a negative 12.5. For 13, we draw the river. Do the opposite, so we're going to subtract 7 from both sides. We get x over 6 equals a negative 11 minus 7, which we're going to add the opposite. So it ends up being negative 11 plus negative 7, which gives us negative 18. The opposite of division is multiplication, so we're going to multiply both sides by positive 6. And we get x equals negative 108. For 14, we're going to draw the river. Subtract the 20 from both sides. 20s cancel out, and we get x over negative 3 equals 10. The opposite of division is multiplication, so I'm going to multiply both sides by negative 3. These cancel out, and I get x equals negative 30. For 15, step 1, draw the river. Subtract the 7 on both sides. We get negative 2x equals a negative 39. The opposite of multiplication is division, so I'm going to go ahead and divide both sides. And I get x equals positive 19.5 because we have a negative divided by a negative, which equals a positive. They like the same music. For 16, I'm going to draw the river. I'm going to add 15 to both sides. And we get x over negative 2 equals negative 35 plus 15, which is negative 20. The opposite of division is multiplication, so I'm going to multiply both sides by negative 2, and I get x equals a positive 40 because we have a negative 20 times a negative 2. They like the same music, so they're positive. All right, 17. Margot solves several equations and then states that all of them have a solution of x equals 7. However, Kenneth disagrees. Determine which of the following equations have a solution of x equals 7, and then justify your response. So what they want us to do is they want us to look at A, B, C, and D and see, is it true? Does x equal 7? So let's take a look. For the first one, I draw my river. I'm going to subtract the 11 from both sides. and I get 6x equals 44. The opposite of multiplication is division, and x does not equal 7. 44 divided by 6 does not equal 7. So I know this one does not work. B, I'm going to draw my river. I'm going to add 18 to both sides. And these cancel out, and I get negative 3x equals 57. The opposite of multiplication is division. The 3's cancel out, and x does not equal 7 because 57 divided by 3 is not 7, right? If we solve it down here, 3 goes into 5 once. You get a remainder of 2. Drop down that 7. 3 goes into 27 9 times. That's definitely not a 7. So we're going to cross that out. Okay? For C, I'm going to draw my river. And I have a minus 14, so I'm going to add 14 to both sides. They cancel out, and I get 2x equals 14, a negative 14. We're going to divide by 2. You're going to get x equals negative 7. Now, you might think, oh my God, C actually works. But it doesn't, because Margot says that they all have a solution of positive 7. And we got a solution of negative 7. So C does not work too. All right, so D. Let's draw our river. We have 7x plus 9, so we're going to subtract that 9 first. And we get 7x equals 49. The opposite of multiplication is division, so we're going to divide by that 7. And we get x equals 7. So that one does work. So determine which of the following equations have the solution. It's definitely D. And who's right? Kenneth is right. Okay? All right. In this next section, it says, use your understanding of rational numbers and multi-step equations to solve the equations below. Now, the key thing with this is we have the distributive property. So I put this in there because I want us to review the distributive property before we move on to tonight's homework. Okay, so I'm really happy that this was included in today's lesson. So remember, anytime you have a parentheses next to, or a number next to a parentheses, that means you have to do the distributive property. So you're going to multiply that outside number with the first term and then the second term. So and you have to do that before you can solve the equation. So let's try it. We have 1/2 times x, that's going to give us 1/2 x, and then 1/2 times 4. Well, 4 we can turn into a fraction by sticking a 1 under it, and we can multiply that by 1/2, and when you multiply fractions, you just multiply across. So 4 times 1 is 4, 2 times 1 is 2, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. So this is going to end up being 1/2 x plus 2 equals negative 12. Now we're ready to do the river. So I'm going to draw the river, and we're going to subtract that 2 from both sides, and we get 1/2 x equals, this is going to end up being a negative 12, right? A negative 12 minus 2, so we add the opposite, and we get a negative 14. The opposite of multiplication is division, so I'm going to divide both sides by 1/2. Okay, and if you'll remember, when you divide fractions, let's do this up here. You're going to take that first, turn it into a fraction, and then you keep it, change it, flip it. So we keep the first number, we change the sign to multiplication, and then we flip the second fraction. Negative 14 times a positive 2 is a negative 28 over 1, which is just negative 28. So we get we get x equals negative 28 as our answer, okay? For number 5, once again, we have the distributive property we need to do first. We have that 2 outside the parentheses, so we need to multiply that through. So we're going to end up with 26 equals 2 times 3x, which is 6x, minus, because there's a minus here, 2 times 2, which is 4. Now we're ready to draw the river. I'm going to add the 4 to both sides. Remember, it doesn't matter what side the x is on, just as long as you get it by itself. And you end up with 30 equals 6x. Now you can just go, okay, what times 6 gives me 30, which is 5. Or you can do the opposite operation, which is division. And you'll end up with 5 equals x. Okay, so 2 different ways of thinking about how to solve that problem. All right, go ahead. I want you to do problems 6 through 9. Pause the video, try them on your own, and then when you're ready to check your answers, go ahead and review the video. Pause your video now. All right, welcome back. Let's see if you did these problems correctly. So for the first one, it still has a distributive property, so I got to multiply that 2/3 through. 2/3 times 3, I'm going to turn that 3 into a fraction by sticking a 1 under it, and I get 6 over 3. 6 divided by 3 is 2. So the 2/3 times 3x is going to end up being a 2x. Okay, now I'm going to do the 2/3 times the 6. Now the 6, I'm going to stick a 1 under it, make it into a fraction just like we did before. 2 times 6 is 12, 3 times 1 is 3, and 12 divided by 3 is 4. So 2/3 times 6 is going to be a 4. And because there's this minus sign there, it's going to be a minus, okay? And then it's going to equal 8. Now we're ready to do the river. So I'm going to draw the river. I'm going to add 4 to both sides. Because remember, you do order of operations backwards, so addition comes before multiplication. And I get 2x equals 12. Divide both sides by 2, and you get x equals 6. Or you could have thought of it as what times 2 gives you 12, which is 6. For number 7, I'm going to multiply this through. And 1.7, remember, if you don't know, then you need to be doing this on the side of your paper, 1.7 times 2. You don't just stop and give up. You got to multiply it out by hand if you don't know it. So 7 times 2 is 14, carry the 1. 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3. There is one number after the decimal, so the decimal is going to go one number in. So we get negative 3.4x because that 2 is negative and the 1.7 was positive, and they don't like the same music, so the answer is going to be negative. And then we have negative 2 times 3.1. So once again, if you don't know it, then you got to multiply it out by hand. 2 times 1 is 2. 2 times 3 is 6. We have one number after the decimal place, so it's going to go in 1, and it's going to be 6.2. We have a negative times a positive, so our answer is going to be negative. Okay. Now, we're ready to draw the river. We're going to add 6.2 to both sides, and we get negative 3.4x equals 10.2. Divide by negative 3.4 on both sides, and we get x equals negative 3. All right, moving on. For 8, we're going to multiply that 5 with the 4 first, and then the 5 with the 2x. So 5 times 4 is 20. 5 times 2x is 10x. We have this minus sign here, so it's going to be a minus sign. Equals negative 14. Now we can draw the river. There's nothing in front of the 20, so that means that it's positive. So the opposite would be to subtract 20. And you get negative 10x equals negative 34. Divide both sides by negative 10, and you get x equals positive 3.4, because you have a negative divided by a negative. They both like the same music. And last but not least, we have 2x minus 9 equals negative 4. So I'm going to draw my river. I'm going to add that 9 to both sides. Get negative 2x equals a positive 5. Divide by negative 2 on both sides, and we get x equals negative 2.5. And those are the answers for 4 through 9. If you got them correct, go ahead and pat yourself on the back. Good job. All right, moving on to number 10. Number 10 says, 3 friends met for a book club at a coffee shop. Each friend ordered a cup of coffee and 2 donuts. The total of the order was $22. A, if a cup of coffee costs $3.25, then use the diagram to write an equation to solve for C, the cost of the donut. Okay, so let's go ahead and get our highlighters. 3 friends, okay, each friend ordered a cup of coffee, so that's 1 cup of coffee and 2 donuts. The total was $22. If a cup of coffee costs $3.25, write an equation where C is the cost of the donut. Okay, let's try a different color. So we have 3 friends, so that's going to be our 3 on the outside of the parentheses. A cup of coffee costs $3.25, so that's where I got that. And then we have 2 donuts, but we don't know what the donuts cost. It's a mystery number, right? But we do know that they want us to use C for the cost of the donut. So if we have 2 donuts and we don't know what the price of the donut is, then that would be 2 times C, our mystery number, okay, our variable C. And then it equals a total of $22. So once again, I think this is a typo. And now it asks, what is the cost of a donut? All right, so we can draw our river. Oops, but before that, if you'll notice, we have the distributive property, so we got to do that first. So it's going to be 3 times the 3.25, then 3 times the 2C. And if you do that, then 3 times 3.25 is going to be 9.75. So we get 9.75 plus 3 times 2, which is 6C, equals 22. Now remember, if you don't know how to do that 3.25 times 3 in your head, then you're doing it on the paper. 3 times 5 is 15, carry the 1. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7. 3 times 3 is 9. There are 2 numbers after the decimal, so our decimal is going to go in 2 numbers. All right, now we're ready to draw the river. We're going to subtract the 9.75 from both sides, and we get 12.25. So 6C equals 12.25. Let me draw a line there so we can separate it. And now we're going to divide by 6, and C ends up equaling $2. And let's see, $2.04. Now it actually comes out to like 2.0416 and then another 6 and another 6. But remember, when we're working with money, we use 2 decimal places, right? So that 4 would be 4 cents, which is 4 pennies, and we don't have anything smaller than pennies when we're working with money. So what is the cost of donut? The cost of the donut is $2.04. About. Okay? All right. For number 11, 2 brothers each purchase a new pair of hiking boots and 2 canteens. The hiking boots cost $34 each. The total of their purchase was $98. Okay, so let's go ahead and highlight our important information. So we had 2 brothers. They each bought a pair of hiking boots, so that's 1 pair of hiking boots and 2 canteens. The hiking boots cost $34 and the total was $98. So define a variable. Well, let's see. For hiking boots, I can call it H, right? And that would be the cost. Oh no, actually they gave us the cost of the hiking boots. What we don't know is the cost of the canteens. So let's use C again, like we did in the previous problems, but C is going to equal the cost of a canteen. Let's go ahead and make that go up there. All right, write an equation. Well, 2 brothers, and they each got 1 pair of hiking boots, which was $34, plus 2 canteens. We don't know the cost of the canteens, so we're using the variable C, so it's going to be 2C. And the total was $98. So that would be our equation, okay? Now they want us to solve, so I'm going to go ahead and solve it down here. 2 times 34 plus 2C equals 98. Remember, we have to do the distributive property first. So 2 times 34 is going to give us 68. 2 times 2 is 4. And we get 68 plus 4C equals 98. Now we're ready to draw our river. We're going to subtract the 68 on both sides. And we get 4C equals what? 30. We divide by 4 on both sides. They cancel out and we get C equals 750. So the cost of the canteen is $7.50. All right, so that's the end of this lesson. Go ahead, on your worksheet packet, you have an additional worksheet to do, the solving 2-step equations with rationals. That's your homework for tonight. And remember, if you have any questions or if you need additional help, you can always ask me in class or make an appointment to see me during office hours. I hope this helped. Have a great day. Bye.